The night sky was ablaze with stars when Olivia Lawrence first spotted the silhouette of a rider approaching her isolated homestead, his shadowy figure cutting through the silver moonlight like a knife through butter. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she raised the lantern higher, its feeble glow barely reaching beyond the weathered porch of the cabin she'd maintained alone for the past 3 years. It was September 1878, and the harsh Wyoming Territory winters would soon descend upon the land. Olivia had spent the day preparing chopping wood, mending fence posts, and reinforcing the small barn where her 2 milk cows and single horse sheltered. At 32, the widow had grown accustomed to handling such tasks alone since Thomas had been claimed by a fever that swept through the territory in 75. What she hadn't grown accustomed to was the bone-deep loneliness that accompanied her every waking moment. As the rider drew closer, Olivia's fingers tightened around the shotgun propped against the porch railing. Night visitors were rare in this remote stretch of land and rarely brought good news. "Evening, madam," called a deep voice as the rider slowed his horse. "Apologies for disturbing you at this hour." The man stepped down from his mount, and Olivia could see he moved with a slight limp. His face remained shadowed beneath his wide-brimmed hat, but his stance appeared non-threatening. "State your business," Olivia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Name's Benjamin Mackintosh, madam. My horse threw a shoe about 5 miles back, been walking since." He gestured toward his dun quarter horse. "Noticed your light from the ridge. Was hoping you might have a place where I could bed down for the night. I'd be happy to pay for the trouble." Olivia lifted the lantern higher, trying to get a better look at his face. "You're a long way from anywhere, Mr. Mackintosh." "That I am," he agreed, removing his hat and revealing a face weathered by sun and wind. He appeared to be in his late 30s with dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. His eyes were clear and direct, meeting hers without wavering. "Heading to Laramie, got work waiting there." Olivia hesitated. The sensible thing would be to send him on his way, but the temperature was dropping rapidly and the next homestead was a good 15 miles further. "I've got a barn," she said finally. "You can sleep there, but I'll keep this close." She patted the shotgun. Benjamin nodded respectfully. "Wouldn't expect anything less, madam, and I'd be obliged." Olivia stepped off the porch, the lantern swinging gently in her hand. "I'll show you where to put your horse." Benjamin followed, leading his tired mount. As they walked toward the barn, he spoke again. "That lantern's running low on oil, flames barely catching." "I know," Olivia replied. "Been trying to conserve what little I have left. Supply wagon isn't due for another 2 weeks." They reached the barn, and Olivia struggled with the heavy wooden door. Without asking, Benjamin stepped forward and pushed it open with ease. Inside, the structure was neat but sparse: 2 stalls for her milk cows, 1 for her horse, and a small area with stacked hay bales. "You can settle your horse there," Olivia said, pointing to an empty stall. "There's water in that bucket." Benjamin nodded his thanks and began removing his horse's saddle. Olivia watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements despite his evident fatigue. "You're welcome to come to the house for a hot meal," she found herself saying, surprising even herself. "Can't offer much, but it's better than hardtack." Benjamin looked up, genuine gratitude softening his weathered features. "That's mighty kind, Mrs. Lawrence," she supplied. "Olivia Lawrence, Mrs. Lawrence," he repeated with a slight nod. "Just Olivia is fine," she said. "Mrs. Lawrence makes me feel ancient." A small smile touched his lips. "Then I'm Ben." Once his horse was settled, Olivia led the way back to the cabin. The lantern sputtered, threatening to extinguish itself. "Darn thing," she muttered, giving it a slight shake. The flame dipped dangerously. "May I?" Ben asked, extending his hand. Hesitantly, Olivia passed him the lantern. From his pocket, he withdrew a small metal flask. When he unscrewed the cap, the sharp smell of lamp oil, not whiskey, reached Olivia's nose. With practiced movements, he opened the lantern's reservoir and poured in a careful measure of oil. When he closed it and adjusted the wick, the flame leaped higher, casting a warm, golden glow across the yard. "Always carry extra," he explained, handing the lantern back. "Never know when you might need light in a dark place." Olivia accepted the lantern, their fingers briefly touching. "Thank you." Inside her modest cabin, Olivia busied herself at the cast-iron stove while Ben sat at the rough-hewn table, his hat resting on his knee. The single room was tidy and sparsely furnished: a small bed in one corner, a trunk at its foot, a rocking chair near the stove, and shelves lined with canned goods and supplies. "Hope stew will do," Olivia said, ladling the thick mixture into 2 bowls. "It's yesterday's, but it's still good." "Smells like heaven," Ben replied sincerely. "Been a while since I've had home cooking." As they ate, Ben shared stories of his travels. He'd been a ranch hand in Texas, panned for gold in California, and most recently worked as a trail guide in Colorado. He spoke without boastfulness, simply relating his experiences in a manner that transported Olivia beyond her isolated existence. "What brings you to these parts?" she asked, genuinely curious. Few men traveled this way without specific purpose. "Cattle operation outside Laramie needs experienced hands," Ben explained. "Owner's expanding his herd, pays well and offers a cabin for year-round work. Thought it might be time to settle somewhat." "Tired of drifting?" Olivia asked. Ben considered this, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe." "Man gets to an age where sleeping under the stars loses some appeal." Olivia nodded, understanding all too well the desire for stability. "My husband and I came here 6 years ago, had grand plans for this place." Ben's eyes held sympathy but not pity. "He's been gone long." 3 years, Olivia replied. "Fever took him, took half the homesteaders in these parts. Yet you stayed." Olivia glanced around the cabin. Humble as it was, it represented everything she and Thomas had worked for. "Where would I go? This is home now." Later, as Ben prepared to return to the barn for the night, he paused at the door. "I could look at that fence on your north pasture tomorrow before I head out. Noticed it was leaning when I rode in." "I couldn't ask that of you," Olivia protested. "You're not asking." "I'm offering," Ben replied simply. "Least I can do for your hospitality." The next morning dawned clear and cool. Olivia rose early, as was her custom, and was surprised to find that Ben had already been up for hours. He'd milked her cows, an unexpected kindness that brought a flush of pleasure to her cheeks. Over breakfast, Ben outlined his plan to fix not just the fence but also a loose shutter he'd noticed on the west side of the cabin. "Wind gets into that, you'll have a miserable winter," he explained. Olivia watched him work throughout the day, moving with purpose and skill. His hands were strong but careful, repairing what was broken with an efficiency born of experience. By mid-afternoon, he'd accomplished more than she could have in a week of solitary effort. When he finally collected his tools as the sun began its descent, Olivia approached him with a proposition. "Your horse still needs that shoe. Blacksmith won't be through here for another 10 days. She hesitated, then continued, "I could use help getting ready for winter. If you're not in a hurry to reach Laramie, maybe you could stay a bit. I'd pay fair wages." Ben studied her face, seeming to weigh something in his mind. "Job in Laramie isn't starting for 3 weeks. Was going to find odd work till then." A slow smile spread across his face. "Reckon I could lend a hand here instead." That evening, they sat on the porch as twilight painted the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. Ben had fashioned a rough repair for his horse's shoe, enough to prevent further damage but not sufficient for a long journey. "How long have you been on the trail?" Olivia asked, sipping the coffee he'd brewed, noticeably better than her own. Ben gazed toward the horizon. 12 years, give or take. Left Missouri after the war, couldn't settle back into that life." "The war changed many men," Olivia observed. Her own brother had returned a stranger, eventually drinking himself to death in '68. "Changed everything," Ben agreed quietly. "Saw too much, did too much." He glanced at her. "Guessing that's not something a lady wants to hear about." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I've buried a husband and fought off rustlers. I'm not some delicate flower that wilts at the mention of hardship." Ben chuckled, the sound warm in the gathering dusk. "No, madam, you certainly are not." The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Ben repaired fences, reinforced the barn roof, chopped endless cords of firewood, and helped Olivia preserve the last of her garden harvest. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation, the silence between them growing companionable rather than awkward. On the fifth night, as autumn winds rattled the shutters, Olivia found herself sharing stories she hadn't spoken aloud in years of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her journey west with Thomas, their dreams for the homestead. "He was a good man," she concluded, her fingers absently tracing the grain of the wooden table. "Deserved better than to die shivering with fever in that bed." Ben's hand covered hers briefly, the touch gentle yet steadying. "Good folks often get the short end." "It's not right, but it's the way of things." Olivia looked up, meeting his gaze. "What about you? Ever been married?" Ben shook his head. "Came close once, Lucy Harrington. Her father owned the mercantile in a little town outside Austin." A shadow crossed his face. "She got tired of waiting for me to settle. Can't say I blame her." "Do you regret it?" Olivia asked softly. Ben considered this. "Regret not being the man she needed, sometimes. Regret the road I've traveled instead. No," he offered a half-smile, "life gives you paths. You choose one and walk it best you can." The second week brought early snow, not the deep winter blanket that would come later, but enough to dust the landscape in white and remind them of the season's approach. Ben had taken to sleeping on a pallet near the stove after Olivia insisted the barn was too cold. The arrangement should have felt improper, but somehow didn't. One morning, Olivia woke to find Ben already gone, his pallet neatly folded. Concerned, she dressed quickly and stepped outside to discover fresh tracks leading toward the creek that bordered her property. Following them, she found Ben kneeling beside the water, washing in the icy flow despite the cold. His back was to her, bare despite the chill, and Olivia found herself momentarily transfixed by the map of scars that crisscrossed his skin, some clearly from the war, others perhaps from the hard life he'd led since. Without his awareness, she retreated, an unfamiliar warmth coloring her cheeks. Later, as they worked together to smoke the deer Ben had hunted the previous day, Olivia found herself studying his hands, strong, capable hands that created rather than destroyed, despite whatever violence they had once known. "Got something on your mind?" Ben asked, catching her gaze. Olivia hesitated, just wondering what it's like, the drifting life. Ben wiped his hands on a cloth, considering. Lonely mostly, free in some ways, binding in others. He looked at her directly. "Why do you ask?" "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice staying here alone," she admitted. "If it might have been better to return east after Thomas died." "What kept you?" Ben's question was gentle, without judgment. Olivia gestured toward the land surrounding them. "This place, our dream, giving up felt like letting him die twice," she sighed. "Foolish, perhaps." "Not foolish," Ben countered. "Brave. Takes courage to stand your ground when the world tries to sweep you along." That evening, a violent storm descended upon them, wind howling around the cabin's corners like a living thing. Ben secured the shutters while Olivia stoked the fire higher. When a particularly fierce gust rattled the very walls, Olivia couldn't suppress a shudder. "Worst storm I've seen since '76, she remarked, trying to sound matter-of-fact rather than frightened. Ben nodded, moving to check that the door was securely barred. "Should blow through by morning." Meanwhile, he withdrew a deck of playing cards from his saddlebag. "Know how to play poker?" Olivia laughed, grateful for the distraction. "Thomas taught me. I'm warning you, I'm rather good." They played by lantern light as the storm raged outside, betting with beans instead of coins. Ben proved to be an excellent player, but Olivia held her own, winning as often as she lost. The simple pleasure of the game, the warmth of the fire, and the security of not facing the storm alone combined to create an unexpected contentment. "Your tell is in your eyes," Ben said after winning a particularly large pot. "They narrow slightly when you're bluffing." Olivia feigned outrage. "They do not," "See, you're doing it now," Ben replied, chuckling. Olivia threw a bean at him, which he caught with surprising dexterity. Their laughter mingled, rising above the storm's fury, and in that moment, the cabin felt truly like home again. The next morning revealed the storm's damage, a section of the barn roof torn loose, fences downed, and one of the large pines near the house split by lightning. Ben surveyed the scene with a practical eye. "We can have this right within a few days," he assured her, already rolling up his sleeves. They worked side by side repairing the damage, Olivia insisting on doing her share despite Ben's protests. By sunset, they'd secured the barn roof and cleared the fallen tree. Exhausted but satisfied, they sat on the porch steps, watching the sky transform from blue to fiery orange. "Thank you," Olivia said simply. Ben glanced at her. "For what, being here?" "I don't know how I would have managed alone." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant call of a nighthawk. Then Ben spoke, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I should be moving on soon. Horse is sound enough now." Olivia felt something cold settle in her stomach, though she'd known this day would come. "Of course. You've got that job waiting." Ben nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "Thing is, I've been thinking, this place needs more than just repairs. It needs regular work, fields plowed, livestock tended, buildings maintained." He turned to face her directly. "You need a partner, Olivia, not just a temporary hand." Olivia's heart quickened. "What are you suggesting, Ben?" "I'm suggesting I might not go to Laramie after all." His gaze was steady, his meaning clear. "If you'd consider a different arrangement." "Are you proposing a business partnership, Mr. Mackintosh?" Olivia asked, her voice carefully neutral though her pulse was racing. Ben's smile was gentle. "I'm proposing whatever you're willing to consider, Miss Lawrence, business, friendship, or—" He left the third option unnamed but understood. Olivia looked away, overwhelmed by the possibilities suddenly opening before her. "I barely know you, true enough," Ben acknowledged. "But I'd like the chance to change that, properly with time." Later that night, unable to sleep, Olivia stood by the window, watching moonlight silver the land she'd fought so hard to keep. Behind her, Ben slept near the stove, his breathing deep and even. She studied his face in repose, noting how the hard lines softened in sleep, making him appear younger, unburdened. The thought of no longer facing each day alone was tempting more than tempting. Yet fear gripped her too. Opening her heart again meant risking loss. Thomas had been taken so suddenly, the pain still raw enough to make her wary. The next morning, Ben announced his plan to ride to the nearest town for supplies. "We're running low on essentials," he pointed out. "And if I'm staying a bit longer, might as well stock up before the heavy snows." Olivia agreed, providing him with a list and money from her carefully hoarded savings. As she watched him ride away, a strange mixture of emotions swirled within her, hope and anxiety in equal measure. In his absence, the homestead felt emptier than it had before his arrival, as though his presence had filled spaces she hadn't realized were vacant. Olivia busied herself with chores, trying not to count the hours until his return. By afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, threatening more snow. Olivia found herself repeatedly checking the road, concern growing as daylight waned with no sign of Ben. When twilight descended and still he hadn't returned, Olivia lit the lantern and placed it in the window, a beacon in the gathering darkness. Another hour passed, then two. The first snowflakes began to fall, gentle at first, then increasing steadily. Just as Olivia was preparing to saddle her horse and search for him, she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. Grabbing the lantern, she hurried onto the porch, holding it high. Through the curtain of snow, Ben emerged, hunched against the cold but very much alive. Relief flooded through Olivia with unexpected force. "Thought you might have decided on Laramie after all," she called, trying to keep her tone light despite the worry that had consumed her. Ben dismounted stiffly, leading his horse toward the barn. "Got delayed. Wagon broke down outside town, family with young children. Couldn't ride past without helping." This simple statement, delivered without expectation of praise, told Olivia more about his character than hours of conversation could have. Once inside, warmed by the fire and a hot meal, Ben revealed the supplies he'd purchased: flour, coffee, sugar, ammunition, and other necessities. But there was one item he seemed hesitant to show. "Got something else," he said finally, reaching into his coat pocket. "Not necessary, but—" He placed a small object on the table between them. It was a hair comb, carved from amber-colored tortoiseshell, elegant without being ostentatious. Olivia touched it gently, surprised by the unexpected gift. "It reminded me of your hair," Ben explained, seeming almost embarrassed. "Thought it might look nice." Olivia's hand went unconsciously to her plain brown hair, usually confined to a practical bun. No one had given her such a gift in years. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Beautiful things belong with beautiful women," Ben replied simply, then immediately looked away as if fearful he'd spoken too boldly. The following days brought a thaw in more ways than one. The winter tightened its grip on the land. Something was warming between them, small touches lingering longer than necessary. Gazes held a heartbeat too long, conversations deepening into the night. One evening, as they finished a particularly satisfying meal, Ben cleared his throat in a way Olivia had come to recognize as preceding something important. "I've been thinking about that arrangement we discussed," he began. "Before I commit fully, there's something you should know." His expression grew serious. "During the war, I did things I'm not proud of. Afterward, too, for a time, I wasn't always the man you see before you." Olivia set down her cup. "We all have pasts, Ben. Mine's darker than most," he insisted. "Rode with some rough men after Appomattox. Was angry, lost. Did jobs that weren't strictly legal." Olivia studied him. "Are you saying you were an outlaw for a time?" Ben admitted, his voice low. "Never killed except in self-defense, but I helped rob a stagecoach once. Ran with the Coulter gang in '67. His eyes met hers directly. "Turned away from that life long ago, but if that changes how you see me, I understand." Olivia was silent for a long moment. "Why tell me this now? Because if I stay, if we build something here together, I want it founded on truth." His hands were clasped tightly before him. "No secrets between us." The honesty of this moved Olivia deeply. "We all make choices we regret, Ben. It's what we do afterward that defines us." Relief softened his features. "You're a remarkable woman, Olivia Lawrence." That night, as snow fell silently outside, Ben took her hand for the first time with clear intent, his touch both question and answer. When Olivia didn't pull away, he drew her gently closer, his other hand rising to touch her cheek with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I never expected to find you," he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "Never thought I'd want to stop wandering until I saw you standing on that porch with your lantern." "I never expected to want someone again," Olivia confessed. "After Thomas, I thought that part of me had died too." Ben's thumb traced the curve of her cheek. And now, instead of answering with words, Olivia closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened into something neither had anticipated. His arms encircled her, strong and secure, as though he'd found his home just as surely as she had. When they finally parted, both breathless, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Olivia. Never said those words to anyone before and meant them like this." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. "I love you too. It terrifies me, but it's true." The winter that followed was the happiest of Olivia's life. Ben proved himself not just a skilled worker but a thoughtful companion, his presence transforming the isolated homestead into a place of warmth and laughter. They worked side by side during daylight hours and spent evenings planning expansions to the property: a larger barn, additional fields, perhaps even a proper orchard. In February, during a rare clear day, Ben took Olivia to the highest point on her property, a small rise that afforded views all the way to the distant mountains. There, with the winter sun glinting off the snow-covered landscape, he knelt before her. "I'm not a wealthy man," he began, and can't offer you fancy things. But everything I am, everything I have is yours if you'll have me as your husband. From his pocket, he produced a simple gold band. Belonged to my mother, he explained. Only thing of value I've carried all these years. Olivia's vision blurred with tears as she extended her hand. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. They were married in April when the first wildflowers pushed through the last patches of snow. The ceremony was small, just the two of them, the circuit preacher, and a handful of neighbors from distant homesteads. Olivia wore a dress of deep blue calico, the tortoiseshell comb securing her hair, which she wore loose for the occasion. By summer, the homestead was transformed. Ben had expanded the fields, added 10 head of cattle to their stock, and begun construction on a larger cabin adjacent to the original structure. Olivia's garden flourished, and for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt secure in her future. On a warm evening in late August, exactly 11 months after Ben had first ridden up to her door, they sat together on the new porch he'd built, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Remember that lantern?" Ben asked, his arm around her shoulders. "The one that was nearly out of oil when we met," Olivia nodded, leaning into his embrace. "You fixed it, first of many things." Ben's hand moved to rest gently on her rounded belly where their first child grew. "Not just the lantern," he said softly. "You were standing alone in the darkness, and somehow I found you." Olivia covered his hand with hers. "We found each other," she corrected gently, "and now neither of us has to stand alone again." As stars began to appear in the deepening blue of the sky, Olivia thought about the strange paths that had led them both to this moment, Ben's years of wandering, her own stubborn determination to hold onto the land, the chance encounter that had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Ben asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Olivia smiled, turning to meet his gaze. "How a single light in the darkness can change everything, how the right person at the right moment can rewrite your whole story." Ben leaned forward, kissing her softly. "Our story," he corrected. "And we're just getting started." As night settled fully across the Wyoming landscape, the lamp in their window glowed steadily. No longer a desperate beacon, but a symbol of the home they'd built together, a light that would burn through all the seasons to come, guiding them always back to each other.